Well, hello there. It's another day. I'm Jim Harrington.
And I am Bill Knight. Hope everything's going well for you today.
It is as good as can be expected. It is a typical summer day where I'm at, which means it starts off like with the sun out, and by the end of the day, we'll have thunderstorms. It's the way it is in the Northeast of the United States.
It's always a little bit different, but I guess we are embarking on probably the biggest presidential conspiracy in history with the Biden scandal. Who was really the president? He was just a puppet, apparently, was ill.
We mentioned this yesterday, but I already heard it yesterday afternoon. Mm-hmm. The other side is now saying, well, you can't pick on him. He's ill. You can't you can't bring these things up. You can't attack him. He's an ill man. Now, mind you, most of the people who know this terrible disease, prostate cancer, most of them have said that it doesn't happen overnight. That there's a gestation period. It takes some time. It takes years in many cases for it to get to where it supposedly is right now. We played a cut yesterday, Bill, on the show where President Biden was speaking at a press conference in Somerset, Massachusetts in 2022, and he mentioned that he had cancer. But I'm sure it was by accident. I'm sure his handlers fell over when he said that, but he did say it. So the question is, has he known for a long time? Has this been something which they've been burying along with a lot of other things? I don't know.
Probably. I don't know if he knew. Well, he had to know. I mean, when did there's a cognitive decline, and then there's a cognitive decline. When did it get to stage 1, 2, or 3 to where he didn't know, that he had something there? But I think he was somewhere in between 1 and 2, where he thought, I got elected president. He was just a placeholder. They just put him in, and that calls into question, was 2020 really fair? Because if he was a placeholder, and I think that's really what they got to be worried about. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, old line Democrat. I mean, he's an older fella, and he's going, stealing the election has always been around for a long time. As a matter of fact, when they used to have to paper count the ballots and everybody would watch, there was actually more things going on. Somebody's going, so-and-so's wife didn't vote. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And all of a sudden she got an absentee ballot. It was filled out. She voted. She voted all Democrat right down the line. Well, wait a minute. She never saw the ballot. And a lot of that.
What you're saying is election fraud is not new?
No, it has been prevalent,
but this 2020 election
older than us
has taken it to a level that we've never seen before. Because what you could do with a couple of ballots here and a few ballots there by hand, with computers, you could do them by the tens of thousands. So that's where the difference is. It isn't that cheating wasn't around. Cheating has always been around. I agree with you. But not like we saw in 2020.
Right. Well, what's going on is there's a generational divide onto how it's done. Somebody that might be 45, 50 or older going, not with today's technology. They can't do that. Okay, take out the old. Just realize people are inclined to cheat. And if it's been a part of the party for years, and Republicans did it back in the 30s too, but and I'm sure there's even times now. But the simple fact is the tools are there to do it in a more sophisticated, technical way, to where it's getting down to the point you're not even going to be able to see, the seeds of it being done.
That's why Trump wants it all back to paper. Because no matter how much cheating there was with paper, you physically could only do so much. You could only handle so much,
right,
and get away with it. Whereas with computers, forget it. The sky's the limit.
Look, you know how fast computers are. I mean, we asked a question yesterday, and I had the answer instantaneously. So you would think with electronic elections, you could get the results immediately. But somehow, well, we're still waiting for the votes to be counted in so-and-so county. Well, we got another straggling county. The late votes coming in. Wait a minute. These are all in the machine. They should be able to be tabulated. Well, we had a box of paper ballots come in. Well, we used to be able to count millions, hundreds of millions of paper ballots and have it all done in a day.
No, I agree with you, but the delay came because the people who were doing the tabulation, when they got extra stuff in, had to figure out a way to manipulate it. It was the manipulation that was the slowdown. It wasn't the fact they had to count them.
Yeah, they're sitting there going, how many votes do we need? Well, we need another 100,000. Okay. Well,
how do we get those
so-and-so
100,000? Okay.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, we got a delay in such and such a county. They know their numbers out there, and they look at the counties and go, well, their votes shy by about this much. Maybe not everybody goes out to vote, which is important. If you're registered, you got to go out and vote, because that way they can't. Well, they do steal your votes. Mm-hmm. They grab ballots that don't show up, and all of a sudden you voted, but you didn't vote for who you thought you voted for.
We talked yesterday about that question that we asked the AI, and I was amazed. I was amazed at the speed and the detail of the answer that we got in less than 60 seconds. And by the way, I think it's posted now.
Yeah, it's up on the jimandbill.com.
Yeah, jimandbill.com. So you might want to check it out. When you read it, it'll blow your mind, because it's detailed, it's sophisticated, it's thoughtful, and it was done in less than 60 seconds by an AI. But when I looked through it this morning before the show started, I started to realize how it's relating to stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Distractions, change the narrative, create noise and distraction. The big talk this morning on the news is what's happening with that detention center, and the representatives who were trying to crash the detention center last week. Remember the two representatives and the mayor of Newark? Apparently, they dropped the charges against the mayor for, I don't know, it was a misdemeanor charge anyway. But they filed charges against one of the representatives. And now that's headline news. And I'm thinking, this is all noise. This is the noise that the AI was talking about.
Yeah.
Create noise and distractions. Flood news cycles with sensational but irrelevant stories like that story and other stories like that. The other story in the news this morning was Chuck Chuckles Schumer.
Oh, yeah.
Chuck Schumer comes out yesterday.
About the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah, and everything with Schumer, absolutely everything with Schumer relates to politics and to this administration. Everything. Mm-hmm. He can't get up in front of a microphone and extend his condolences like a dignified human being and be nonpartisan for just a few minutes. No, he got up there yesterday and he made a correlation, a connection between what happened to that Mexican ship in the Brooklyn Bridge over the weekend and the Trump administration, and more specifically, DOJ. Listen.
We know that the Trump administration has been meddling in U.S. Coast Guard operations, from staffing to command and comms. And I have the general sense of a DOJ dysfunction in parts of the Coast Guard. To put it mildly, after being fully briefed on last night's Brooklyn Bridge accident, one thing is very clear. There are many more questions than answers. We know that there has been meddling by the Trump administration into the Coast Guard staffing, and now we need to know how this meddling might have impacted the events of last night.
Unbelievable. This guy, he's shameless. And what amazes me, he just continues to be in the public square. The guy is nothing but a con man, has always been a con man, is a pure politician, a pure partisan, nothing more. He's not a patriot. He's a partisan, and there's a big friggin' difference. And he gets up there, mind you, 2 young Mexican sailors lost their lives in that tragedy. It was a tragedy. Apparently, engine cut out on this tall ship as it was sailing out of the harbor, and it got caught in the current. I guess it was caught in a current that brought it backwards into the bridge.
Yeah.
And when
how is that the Coast Guard's fault? Oh, they didn't know the engine was going to go out and nothing. There was no way they could know that it went out. And anything that the Trump administration has done to realign the budget, it wouldn't be instantaneous, any effect on it. That would take a gradual amount of time. They're doing the same thing with some of the other news that's out there. They're blaming it all on the Trump administration and budgets and whatnot. Like
they blamed, by the way, the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard came out with a statement.
Said no, it's not us.
Everything's fine. It has nothing to do with the Coast Guard. We were at top. We were not understaffed. We were fully staffed. All of the equipment in the harbor was working. The trafficking equipment. We knew what was going on in the harbor. So
they're blaming weather now on Trump and saying, well, you know, they've cut the budget to the weather service. They don't have people working all night anymore, eating Twinkies, drinking coffee, and not doing their job anyway. But besides that, you know, look, I worked for a company. We chased storms. That was one of our big things. You know, we were in the Bible Belt. We had these big signals, and we would sit there and go what they called all EBS, and we would sit there and chase these storms. But let me tell you something. Those storms can sneak up on you, and a lot of the reporting that goes on are from volunteer spotters, because even with the radar back then and now, there's no way of knowing. And their thing of, well, it hit in the wee hours of the morning. Had we had a guy drinking his coffee and eating his Twinkies at 2 a.m., he could have alerted people.
Well,
I'm sorry, but you're sleeping. If it hits in the wee hours of the morning.
You just talked about AI. And the fact of the matter is that right now, I'm sure a lot of these weather stations are automated, that they run all night long, even if they're not manned.
They do a better job.
Pardon?
They do a better job.
Well, yeah, absolutely. They keep an eye on the weather all the time. They make predictions. Mm-hmm. They look at what's happening out there, and based upon what they see, I'm talking about AI, it'll make a guesstimate as to what's going on. You don't need to have people manning it all the time if you have computer systems in place. Which leads me to another point. Do you hear what happened in Newark yesterday? I'll tell you what happened in Newark yesterday. There was another interruption in communications in Newark. Newark is like 4th or 5th largest airport in the country. And they've had, I think this is the 4th or 5th interruption they've had. This is scary stuff. And I'm sorry, part of me says, I know the equipment's old, but do you think maybe, I'm just saying, could this be some kind of an attack on our infrastructure? Could this be something that's intentional and not just simply old equipment? I'm just saying, I know that's not, instantaneously people say, oh, another conspiracy theory. No, it's a legitimate question. By the way, where were all those, remember those drones that were flying around with,
where were they?
We never got any answers to them about 2 or 3 months ago?
Yeah.
That was in New Jersey, folks. I'm just saying, I don't know, but we never got an answer to those hundreds of drones that were flying around the airspace, and suddenly there's a problem with the air infrastructure in New Jersey?
Well, let me explain one thing. Yeah, they should have the new equipment, but new equipment, old equipment really doesn't matter if you don't have the people there staffing them that know what the hell they're doing. And in defense of the old systems, which Buttigieg did a terrible job. He had the money to fix all that, but he didn't. But you and I worked in an industry where we have equipment, transmitting equipment, communications equipment. I worked at some prestigious places that everyone said, oh, they got the best of the best. No, we had well-maintained stuff. And the basic function of it is to transmit and receive and send out, signals. And as long as that capability is maintained, they might sit there and say, yeah, this is a little weak. We might have to replace a transistor or a resistor in there or something technical in there. That's what you have engineers for. And they do that and they keep it going. And you have a backup system where you take down the main system and do, oh, you've ever heard this before, you see it on the internet, maintenance.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and then, so it really gets down to technical error. You know,
one of the biggest stations I ever worked on in my life was in Boston, owned by Westinghouse at the time, WBZ. And I'll never forget walking into the studios. I'm sure it's all gone now, but this is back in the mid-'70s. And the console that I worked at had to be made like in 1940. And it sounded like $1 million. And it was because of what you just said. They did the most impeccable maintenance on their equipment, and I'm sure they probably still do, although things have changed. Things are modular. You can snap it out and snap a new one back in. You know, whereas in those days you had to go to the root and fix it by hand. So the point I'm trying to make is what you just said. If you maintain an old piece of equipment, it can last for a long, long time.
Modular systems, that came about in the 70s and 80s. I remember we got in at a big 50,000 watt station. We had a board that came in one time, and all the channels were modular, and we had backups for it. And, you know, every once in a while you're doing a show, and the engineer would come in and lean over your shoulder. Oh, I'm going to pop this one out, pop the backup in. And they'd check and calibrate them all the time. There was always work going on in the system. And as far as the studios were concerned, and you had jocks that were pigs, and you had the engineering room, you could go in there. Everything was scrubbed down, at least where I worked. Everything was scrubbed clean. You could sit there and fry an egg and eat it off the floor. That's how clean it was, because dirt is the main culprit.
So if they
chaos.
maintain those communications equipment at the airports, and I'm sure they did. I mean, you can't go this long with that equipment and not have maintenance. So they probably had a maintenance system in place. You have to ask yourself, is it the equipment that's causing the problem right now, or is it something different?
I think it's something different.
Yeah. Hey, listen, we got to take a break here. Pause for the cause, as they would say. A reminder, don't forget, like and share our show, if you would. Like and share the show. So the equipment in New Jersey still causing problems. They act like they don't know what's going on. This is the fourth time. Oh, my God. Watch me scratch my head. Oh, I can't figure out what's going on. There are people who know what's going on. As a matter of fact, I have a cut here. It's Sean Duffy. He's the transportation secretary right now under President Trump. And he was asked about our air infrastructure and why it's in the state that it's in right now. Wasn't there money allocated to the infrastructure like during the Biden administration?
Everyone's shocked that the system is so old and antiquated, but it wasn't shocking to Joe Biden and it wasn't shocking to Pete Buttigieg. They knew we had an old system. They saw the GAO report saying it was about to fail. And so the largest infrastructure package, Martha, ever known to man in the history of the world, the infrastructure bill under Joe Biden, $1.2 trillion. They sent only $5 billion to fix air traffic control. And of the $5 billion, Pete Buttigieg spent less than $1 billion to fix this problem. Instead, he was focused on racist roads and changing the name of cockpit to flight deck or airman to aeronaut. Stupid stuff. And so now, as the Trump administration has come in, it was shortly after DCA, Martha, I started digging into the FAA and realized it wasn't just one small part of the infrastructure. It was the whole infrastructure that had to be built brand new. And so I've developed a plan. I've talked to the president. He's signed off on the plan. We now have to go to Congress and say, listen, Congress, this is imperative. This is really critical infrastructure. Let's get the money to build this brand new. It's going to take time. It's going to take, 3 or 4 years to build it.
Amazing. 3 or 4 years. Do we have 3 or 4? If the problem's as bad as it is right now, do we have 3 or 4 years to get the system in place? I mean, go ahead.
That I don't know. But, the thought occurs to me. This is a great nation, one that has always been on the utmost security. And the planners before knew that, airports could go down, maybe taken out in an attack. I'm just saying hypothetically. There are mobile stations that can be transported around, communication stations, that could probably be put into place. Bring it in. It's an emergency. This way we can operate the planes. We can run a command
Yes.
center there and do everything while they go in there and they rip all the wires out and put in a whole new system and test it.
I agree. If you go down to Antarctica, right, and you decide, yeah, we're going to build a station here, and we have to have a runway on that ice over there, and we're going to have some kind of air traffic because we're flying planes in and out of here. They bring in a system, a mobile system. I'm sure the Army has got loads of different, capable systems they could bring in and put in place of the failing systems. At least,
they can go there and they can operate. Not only they shut off the military frequencies, but they are able to operate on the commercial frequencies. And I'm not sure that I don't know. Never worked in an air traffic control tower, but I would think that you're an air traffic control tower. You've got to be able to hear and monitor everything or have communications for everywhere. So those mobile stations could be brought in. You could bring in the military to sit there and say, give your traffic controllers a break. We're going to retrain them while we're rebuilding their tower. We have a mobile system there, and we just take it over because it is air safety. It is of vital importance to the country.
Can they install sat phones on airplanes and use them as a backup so that if you lose communications, you can hit a switch and connect via satellite phones? I mean,
well, I'm sure
satellite
here's your problem.
What's that?
Your problem is the human factor, because we have, and I don't want to sit there and raise the flag of DEI, but you have a lot of people today. You've got pilots that went and got, thousands of hours. I can fly that 747. But, anymore they walk in, they have their little satchel. Everything is programmed in the plane. Back in the late 80s, they were sitting there. They had the, what was it, the Lockheed L-1011 or whatever it was?
Yeah.
It could sit there, and once you got the clearance to back out of the ramp and get out into the runway, the plane could technically, do itself and take off itself.
I was on
all programmed in.
Back in the 80s. I was flying it was a short hop from Buffalo to Pittsburgh with my family, and we were like the only people on the plane. It was during a snowstorm. And the pilot, we were all concerned. We're flying into Pittsburgh in snow, and we were talking to the steward, and he said, "Don't worry about this. This is a Fokker F-100. It can take off by itself, and it can land by itself. It doesn't even have to have hands on. It can land by itself." This is back in the 80s. And that plane, by the way, is obsolete now and gone, long gone, the Fokker F-100. But you're right. They had planes back in the 80s that were capable of literally flying themselves.
Yeah, but what you got, you got guys that were well-trained but got a little bit lazy because they haven't had to do things.
Yep.
And that has been a problem in the past. Now, fast forward to DEI during the Biden administration. People got put into jobs that, well, any monkey can do this. Any idiot can do this. They can sit there and just hit the red button and it flies itself. What happens if the red button doesn't work? Now you've got a person that was never properly trained, has no memory. This is like a airplane disaster movie, where the guy on the ground is sitting there going, "What the hell? What's up there?"
That's true. It's very true. And you would think there would be more intense training as far as flight training is concerned, and that they would probably have a very sophisticated process to keep pilots up to date with how to fly airplanes. But I think you're right. I think they become incredibly lazy because there's so much technology. Just look at a flight deck right now. A flight deck is the cockpit, all right? I hesitate to use the term because Pete Buttigieg gets uncomfortable. But the cockpit of an airplane today, a 747, let's say, a brand new 747, you walk in and you see computer screens everywhere. Everything's on a flat screen computer. You walk into a cockpit of a 747 when they first came out back in like 1970, and it was an airplane. It was gauges, it was flight controls, and the pilot in that big airplane had to fly it as if he was flying a Cessna. And that's the difference. Right now, Bill, like you said, a lot of these planes, they'll take off, they'll fly along, and they'll land by themselves. And the problem is, when you run into a hiccup, many times a lot of these young pilots, they're lost. They forget how do I do that again? And sometimes it's that hesitation, that little pause for a second to try to figure out what to do next that can be a disaster in the making.
Yeah, you probably don't see it anymore. It used to be that if you flew, you know what I'm talking about, because you would do it. You pre-flight the plane. And anytime, even at the airport, I used to sit there when I used to fly, I'd sit there and see the pilot going, he's taking over the plane. The shift has changed. And he would walk around and do the pre-flight that he can on the big bird and then get inside, and there are things you do. But I'm sure that everything is automated, the run-up of the engines, whatever that they have to do. Those things do everything themselves.
Well, there's certain things, Bill, that should never be affected by DEI. Certain jobs that DEI should have no place. Pilots, no place for DEI in the cockpit. You need the most qualified, the most capable people flying those airplanes. Period. End of sentence.
Look, if the guy's name is Bob and he's a transgender that identifies as Lucy, I don't care. As long as Lucy knows how to fly that plane.
If he's the best at flying that plane, who cares?
Yeah.
You don't want a DEI surgeon doing your heart surgery. You want the best surgeon available to do your heart surgery. There are certain jobs that you cannot allow politics and nonsense, and I think DEI is very much, it's nonsense, in my opinion. I just think it's ridiculous. Well, diversity, DEI, equity, and inclusion. Oh, come on. If you live in we have so many of the rules and regulations right now that we're following. It's another thing I can't stand is hate crimes. We'll have to charge that murder as a hate crime. Whoa, wait a second. You're charging that murder as a hate crime? When would you ever charge a murder not as a hate crime? You killed the guy. That's the nonsense that we're living in right now.
Yeah, but see, they take it further. Let's say that you have a situation, you were attacked and you killed in self-defense. Maybe not, intentionally to kill, but it was self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
They'll take that and say it's a hate crime too.
Yeah, well, it gives them another reason to be political about something which shouldn't be political.
Yeah, politics has creeped into things that it should have never creeped into. And but it's the nature of man. It is the nature of the human kind. And I hate to say that, but we're a fouled species.
Are we in a country of on the ascent or on the descent? Are we still becoming a better nation, or have we reached our pinnacle, and are we in a decline right now?
Well, I just said mankind, so I would say it doesn't matter about our nation. I think the human race is in a decline, because we're not the only country that's got this going on. Oh, it's going on everywhere.
It's worse in Europe.
Yeah.
Right now, Keir Starmer, right, in England, the prime minister, for the first time in God knows when, he started to sound almost like a conservative about immigration. It's like suddenly he had an epiphany, like, whoa, we have too many people here, and they're not speaking our language, and they're taking over our systems, and they're actually imposing their society on ours. And all of a sudden it occurred to him, maybe that's not a good thing. We may lose England as England.
Well, you know what? Let me give you a heads up. When you think you're going to lose something, you've already lost it.
Yeah,
it's already lost. There's a percentage thing there.
I'd like to think that's such a hopeless belief. And I know what you're saying based upon a lot of things in history. Mm-hmm. By the time they realized that the ship was sinking like the Titanic, by the time it occurred to him that, hey, we may be sinking, it was already a fait accompli. It's going down. You may just realize it right now, but the moment you hit that iceberg and tore that hole along your right side of the ship, you were toast. I don't know.
Look, you anytime you have a problem, you fix it. You don't put a Band-Aid on it. And we've got a lot of Band-Aids in our ship of life. And we've got a lot of bad decisions in our ship of life.
A good decision, though, would be to like and share our show. Tell your friends about it. Tell them what we do here. We're here Monday through Saturday, and we give you the news to the best of our knowledge and also our take on what's happening in the world. A little different. It's proven to be pretty successful. On our last platform, we had an enormous audience. We just moved to a new platform. When you move from one platform to another, you don't bring your audience numbers with you, believe it or not. You think you would, right? But you don't. You have to start fresh. So we're asking that you tell your friends about the show so that it grows into the success that it was. And you may say, well, why'd you move if you had such great numbers on the other platform? Well, we can monetize on this platform better than we can monetize on the other platform. And that's why we made the move. Yep.
Yeah, at some point in time, you got to do things to keep the lights on in the place.
Yep. So do us a favor, like and share our show. So, Bill, the other thing that got my goat yesterday, and it still bothers me every time I think about it, is the Epstein suicide. I'm kind of disappointed in Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, two guys who I really put a lot of hope and trust in. I thought that they couldn't be swayed. They came out and they said, well, I'm going to play the cut. It's 2 minutes long. This is Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, and the deputy director, Dan Bongino, about Jeffrey Epstein.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to get... I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I know it's hard work.
So who's in charge at the New York FBI field office? Who's withholding Epstein docs from the Attorney General? James Dennehy is running the show there. There he is. This is the guy who emailed his whole staff to dig in after Trump took office. And don't forget that James Comey's daughter is an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And she worked on the Epstein and Maxwell cases. She's kind of knee-deep in this. Epstein was facing sex trafficking charges in Lower Manhattan. Where's all that paperwork? The FBI seized computers, surveillance videos, banking records, file cabinets, and photographs from all of Epstein's properties in New Mexico, the Virgin Islands, Palm Beach, and in New York. The Justice Department also gave Epstein a sweetheart non-prosecution deal 17 years ago. Where are those files? The Bureau of Prisons. Where are those files? You remember where Epstein killed himself? I asked Bill Barr about that, why everything seemed to go wrong that night.
When I first heard all the information and all the coincidences here, I was suspicious.
What were the coincidences? I mean, those were a lot of coincidences.
Well, one of the cameras was out.
Right.
He was supposed to have a cellmate. The cellmate left. They didn't replace the cellmate. And the guards who were supposed to check him every half hour didn't check him.
My EMT source said he was on the scene immediately to pull Epstein's body out to the morgue. And when he got to the cell, he saw 7 people there touching Epstein's body and moving stuff around.
See, here's the thing. Dan, I like Dan Bongino. I think he's an honest guy. I liked his radio show. I liked what he seemed like a really straight shooting guy. Kash Patel seemed like he was a guy who was a real thinker. The thing that I don't understand about these guys, you heard Dan Bongino said, I saw the file. I saw the whole file. I saw the file. It was suicide. My question is, who wrote the damn file? My question is, where did you get the information in the file? How do you know the file is accurate? And, you heard that there's a guy they promoted before he got into office. They thought that he was going to be fired, and as soon as Kash Patel gets into office, he promotes the guy. He gives him a better position at the FBI. He's a real FBI agent. That's why we promoted him. I don't understand it, folks. I think that we're not getting the straight scoop. Now, I know, Bill, you said yesterday, and it's an interesting theory, that maybe they're trying to disarm the culprits, let them think that there's nothing to see here. They're not going to prosecute anything, and they can let down their guard. That would be an interesting theory, but I don't know. I hear how definitive they are. They're closing the door on the Epstein case. I don't know. I heard a lot of guys like you and me, thoughtful guys, intelligent guys saying, nah, they don't buy it either. We haven't seen the file. No, we haven't looked at the information that these guys have. But do you trust the information? If I'm a bad guy, Bill, and I want you to believe something, and I have control of a document that you have to read to verify whatever it is I'm trying to sell you, I can write whatever I want. I can change whatever detail or facts that I want. So
there's a lot of ways you can read and interpret what went on there. I listen to the voices, and what I hear is a different demeanor and style. When they were talking before, they were fired up. No, I read the document. He committed suicide. I would really like to take his voice and run it and see and compare it to other things and see if I detect that he is actually lying, like a lie detector.
Yeah.
Is he lying or covering up something? Now, if you really wanted to get into a weird conspiracy, I'm not saying this, but just, let's just take the gloves off. Anything is possible. So let's say that a player or players are put into, a spotlight that, the conservatives go, yeah, he's our guy. Yeah. And then they go, okay, time to promote him up to rain in our parade. Was there, because Bongino was from the system before.
Yeah.
And then he got out.
Yeah, that's true.
So
essentially what you're saying is we really don't know these people, folks.
Yeah. So maybe their intent all along was to infiltrate and get on our side just so that they could, tinkle on our parade. But I don't sit there and hate them because I just said that. I'm just saying.
I think it's point 3 on the AI instructions on how to mess things up.
Yes.
Point 3 is undermine credibility of truth tellers. Undermine the credibility of the truth tellers. Now, we're thinking that Dan and Kash are truth tellers, right?
And Trump is too.
Let's say Trump is the guy let's say he's the only real truth teller. He's just barreling along doing his thing. He's surrounded by a bunch of people. Not all the people who are supposedly Trump supporters are Trump supporters. I mean, case in point, look at Mike Pence. Mm-hmm. The number 2 in his first administration, the guy he trusted. The reason why he was number 2, by the way, was because it was recommended to him. Mike Pence, real good guy, real ally, a staunch guy, and he knows Washington, Mr. President. You don't know Washington. You yourself said you only spent 13 days in your whole career in Washington. But Mike Pence will be right there by your side to help you along the way. We'll get like Supreme Court justices like, Amy Coney Barrett. Wouldn't she be a great Supreme Court justice? Somebody trustworthy. No, that, by the way, folks, you really have got to go to jimandbill.com. Just take a moment. If you have an iPad that you're looking at right now or your iPhone, just just go to jimandbill.com and check out, it's called Fictional Plan to Control News Narratives. That's what it's called. We put the question to the AI yesterday on the show, on the fly, and this AI spit out a plan that not only could be used, but is probably being used right now by somebody somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? We asked the question for it to devise a plan. And it goes out and does its search, and it goes and puts something together. But perhaps it didn't have to devise a plan. This is the plan, because if you look at the news today and what it's been in the past and where it's going, it's spot on. So this has been the playbook for a long time.
Yeah, we are. All of us are watching a show that has been scripted, and the actors are all doing their job, all playing their parts.
Yeah,
and
are
we
there
think
double agents?
And they're so good, we think they're real, but they're just
Are
actors.
there double agents? Pence was a double agent.
Yep, he was.
You know?
And how many other guys are double agents right now in the system?
Yeah. Look, I don't want to bring the credibility of these guys down because we don't know the plays yet. But what I would say is keep a suspicious eye on everybody.
Well, it's what President Reagan once said. Trust but verify.
Yeah.
And that's how we should approach every single one of these people who are in office right now in support of the president. If they look like they're allies and they're real, trust them. But keep an eye on them anyway, because you just never know. You never know. I've said this to my wife on numerous occasions. We really don't know these people. We make these evaluations from the sidelines, but we really don't know who's doing what, where, and why they're doing it. We have opinions that we've created about people, and you think, boy, he wouldn't do that. Well, how do we know he wouldn't do that? We don't know these people. So,
the other thing you got to consider, is a two-tier factor. Number one, three. Can somebody be manipulated? Can they be scared into jumping the fence? Can they be bought into jumping the fence? They get in with the right intentions, but all of a sudden they see that they can't win this scenario. Mm-hmm. It's join or survive or die. What do you do in that situation? Yep, Epstein committed suicide.
Yeah. Yeah, get used to it. That's the story, and we're sticking to it now.
Yeah.
Get used to it.
You're here. Congratulations. You made it to the big leagues. Now, you played the game one way, and maybe you're right. You could be I'll tell you what, you're absolutely right. But your story just changed.
But here's the other thing, and this just occurred to me as we were talking. Epstein's suicide or not suicide, take that and just put it aside. It really isn't important. He's dead. Whether he was murdered or he committed suicide, he's dead. He's dead. My question is, who was involved on Epstein Island? Who are the people that were corrupting children and hurting innocents? And do you know what Epstein's suicide question is? It's a distraction.
Well, I was just going to say, maybe that is the intent too. It's just saying, let's get off this. He's dead. Let's just accept he's dead and he did it himself. Who cares whether somebody else did it or he did it? He's dead. Let's get to the focal point of the investigation. And that is who was on the island, who was corrupt.
Yeah. But they don't want to tell you that, by the way. We would rather have you spend all your time spinning your wheels about the question of whether he committed suicide or not.
Yeah, the real question is going to be, let's get off of that. He's dead. Okay, he's gone. But the remnants still remain of what happened on the island, what he did, what he was the architect of. So let's get to that. Now,
so the real question should be,
nothing really happened.
The real question should be is, when are you going to release the documentation that shows us who was there and what they were doing.
Yeah. Now, if they say, well, there was nothing to the documents, they're not there, they're destroyed, then you got to sit there and say, okay, the fix is in.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing that's going on right now, and it's very easy to see, we've talked about it before many times, is the lawfare, the judicial interference, and it continues unabated. The Supreme Court lifted Obama's, the Obama judge, he blocked Trump's order to revoke protected status of hundreds of thousands of migrants. Well, apparently that judge, that federal judge, that lower court judge,
Edward Chin,
said to the Supreme Court, right here, if you know what I mean, he said, I don't care what they say upstairs. I don't care what the higher court says. I want you guys to get into my courtroom and get it to me tonight. This guy, this is where we're going right now. We're in a situation where the judges are so arrogant, they're so out of control that they are ignoring the orders from higher courts. They're saying to the judges on the higher courts, up your nose. You know what I'm saying? Obama Judge Beryl Howell ruled that DOJ, when they took over the U.S. Institute of Peace, and there was a big brouhaha. I love that term. A big brouhaha.
Brouhaha.
Yes. Well, she said, you have to reinstate everybody. I don't care. They can't do it at DOJ. Never mind the fact that DOJ was a real department. It was a real government agency. It still is. Never mind the fact that they were authorized by the president to do what they were doing. I'm a judge. I'm Beryl Howell, and I'm changing everything. This is where we're at right now, folks. They are out of control. These judges are out of control. And I dare I say, everybody's waiting for the Supreme Court to come down and say to the lower courts, knock it off, stay in your lane. You haven't got control of the entire country. Your jurisdiction doesn't go coast to coast. Mm-hmm. But they haven't done that yet. But the closest they've come was this ruling yesterday, the Supreme Court ruling to revoke the protected status of those. And it was only a temporary ruling in the first place. So what the court said was the president has a right to remove a temporary ruling. I mean, it's kind of, it's not a big deal, but and by the way, don't rely on the Supreme Court to be your savior. That ruling yesterday was an 8-1 decision, which everybody was talking about like it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh my God, it was 8-1. The only one who voted against it was Ketanji Brown Jackson because she's still trying to figure out what a woman is. She can't answer that question. Obviously, answering a bigger question like this would just be too much for her. So, but the other thing is now we have a situation where people are going to think that the Supreme Court is actually doing its job. They're not. Because when they get to a situation where they're going to have to make a real decision, a real judgment in support of this administration, I'll bet you dollars to donuts they're going to shaft the administration. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, there'll be a couple of guys who will be honest, guys, Clarence Thomas, Alito, they're honest men, but there are other guys in there who are judges who are really lightweights, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they're Republican by name or conservative by name, and that's really it. But the conservatives, the true conservatives, they're getting up there in the years to where they're going to be, stepping down or time, wins the bet. And somebody gets to a point, if that happens during Trump's era, it's a conservative to replace a conservative. If, the Democrats get back in the next go-around, they may have an opportunity to really stack the courts, and get, if they have the whole judicial system, we're not just screwed, we're screwed royally. The debate over Ketanji goes, to Joe Biden. Did he really... call the shots on that.
That's a very good point. Is Ketanji Brown Jackson a legitimate Supreme Court justice if Joe Biden wasn't making the decisions in the first place?
Well, that's the big thing. The biggest conspiracy out there, probably, definitely, in probably the century. And the simple fact is, who was really in charge? Biden was apparently a puppet. They knew before he was elected that he had cancer and how bad it was, and they were just going along. At what point in time, or did he ever have any cognitive ability or make any decisions? Or was he just a puppet? And it was Obama calling the shots. And either way, that throws the whole thing out. Every pardon he did, everything.
Everything that Joe Biden signed, every executive order, every federal judge. How about all these federal judges that are throwing monkey wrenches into the administration's, their movements? Maybe every single one of these federal judges can be looked at. Did Biden really nominate every one of those federal judges?
I would say no, and here's the problem that they have, and this is the problem. Going back to the plan of, infiltrating the news and massaging the stories that are out there. This is a story about him being the legitimate power in charge, best president ever. And this was sold to Republicans and Democrats. Democrats believed it. And now, all of a sudden, they're waking up to the coffee that has a different smell going, wait a minute, this was all a lie?
Yeah.
So they see that too. So they really got a spin here that they've got to sell and get it going because they don't know what to do.
So let's say hypothetically that we figure out that Joe really didn't sign anything. Maybe he signed a handful of things early on. But let's say most of the stuff was done with an auto pen. All of the pardons that Joe put into place, are they invalid? I would think. Everything that Joe signed as president would be called into play, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes me ask you a question. With the auto pen there, let's just say a president doesn't do something. It's a bill that's not going to be public, but it's just some kind of little procedural thing, but you need the president's signature. And I, being the good little loyal partyist, I sit there and go, look, I have control of the auto pen. Just give it to me. Yeah, here we go. All right, there's your signature right there. File that away. It is now law, And what happens with that? Could that have gone on? The auto pen really proposes a problem.
I saw like 6 separate things. Milley's pardon, a bunch of other different laws. They showed them on television, and they took all the signatures from all these different documents, and then they merged the signatures together to one, and they all matched perfectly. Every one was an auto pen, every single one.
That makes me believe that those really aren't legit. Because when I first heard about the auto pen, I said, whoa, back this bus up. That's not exactly right because, like you see Trump there in front of everybody and he takes his time and he looks and he kind of, does his shoulder thing and he does that little signature. He's proud of his signature. Joe, not so much. I'm not saying he's got a bad. No. I got the bad signature. I mean,
well,
an auto pen couldn't do my signature.
At some point, somebody's got to do something in our system. At some point, there has to be some kind of legal remedy to all of this nonsense. Everybody has a question, but I don't see anybody putting any answers out there. Mm-hmm. Everybody's saying, well, could Joe have was he really in his right mind? Was Joe cognitive? Was he thinking clearly when he did he give authorization to whoever had the auto pen? How do you prove he didn't say to whoever had the auto pen, use the auto pen, I'm right here? And even with that, by the way, I think when you use the auto pen, you have to have 5 separate signatures from people who kind of witnessed the auto pen. I don't believe that it stands on its own. I could be wrong, but I heard on another program that you have to have it verified by witnesses. So,
all right, but you're verifying a machine, and if I want to pass something through that stinks, and I get it to sign, am I going to get people from the opposition there, or am I just going to get some loyalists there that know exactly what's going on? If all you need is 5 signatures. And if they need Biden in the room, he could be, in the chair in the corner taking a nap.
Okay.
Hey, Joe, we're doing this.
So let's stop for a second. Let's go back to that thing that the AI wrote yesterday about messing things up. And
you're loving this.
Well, no, I think it's such a good roadmap to follow. But we're talking about the auto pen. We're talking about fraudulent documents. Is this clouding up the water, so to speak? Are we still losing focus on the real solid issues? I mean, let's say hypothetically they determined that Biden was. I hear them saying it's the story of the century. If it's been proven that Biden was fraudulent, I knew Biden was fraudulent in 2020.
Right.
All of a sudden, the left it's an epiphany. Like, ooh, maybe he wasn't in his right mind. Maybe the fact that he was shaking hands with somebody none of us could see. Maybe there was something to that story,
Well, there's one of two things. It either means that Democrats are idiots and they're blind, and they won the election when they put a dummy in, or it means the election was stolen. Which of the two? Was it you or was it them? I'm asking.
Oh, I know. I think it was stolen. It was stolen.
So I'm asking any Democrat listening, did you vote for him in sound-minded body because you thought he was the guy? Were you deceived?
Yeah.
Are you blind and stupid? And you got 3 questions. Actually, it's one question. Either he won it legitimately or they pulled the wool over your eyes. Which one is it?
Well, I think it was stolen, and I think it was there was a phony presidency behind them. You heard about the stories about Obama. He even bragged about it at one point. Remember, he said, the perfect situation would be if I could wake up in the morning and stay in my jogging suit and go downstairs, and I could make the decisions into someone's earpiece who had to do all the public appearances and stuff like that, but I could make the decision from my basement. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what essentially what he said. And maybe that's exactly what he did.
Well, who's being quiet in all of this right now?
Obama.
Yeah. The only Obama that's making noise is Michelle. She's going like, well, people line up to come get my advice. I do speeches. I've written books.
Yeah.
I've got a podcast, none of which do very well. But what is she, teeing up for? Does she think she's going to be a candidate?
The other bit of noise that was out there over the past couple of days, as I'm sure everybody's aware by now, is Comey's little excursion along the beach by his home, where he just happened to run into some seashells which said 8647. And
that's amazing.
I got to play for you this. This was yesterday. Comey, of course, after he was interviewed by the Secret Service, his first stop was to race over to MSNBC, which, of course, is the Democratic mouthpiece, and to explain to a sycophant anchor who sat there just all wide-eyed like, oh, this is interesting. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. Listen, this when you hear this man talk, remember he was the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He wasn't a mall guard. He wasn't working security at Walmart. He was the Federal Bureau of Investigation director. He had a handle on just about anything legal, yet he was surprised that the seashells meant what they meant. Listen.
You are back in the middle of a political firestorm.
Yeah, for walking on the beach with my wife. So I don't know how we ended up here. It never occurred to me that it was any kind of controversial thing, but that's the time we live in.
So take me back to the walk on the beach.
We were walking on the beach. We went to the beach to prepare for this week, which was the launch of my book, and to think about the book and to prepare to answer questions about it. And we were walking back towards the road, and we saw in the sand someone had arranged shells with numbers. And Patrice, my wife, said, "Why would someone put an address in the sand?" And I said, "I don't know." And we stood over it, and I said, "I think it's some kind of like political message." And she said, 86, when I was a server, she did a lot of work in restaurants, meant to remove an item from the menu when you ran out of ingredients. And I said, well, to me, as a kid, it always meant to leave a place, to ditch a place. I said, that's really clever. So then she said, you should take a picture of that. And I did. And I posted it on my Instagram account and thought nothing more of it until I heard through her that people were saying it was some sort of a call for assassination, which is crazy. But I took it down. Even if I think it's crazy, I don't want to be associated with violence of any kind.
Understand something. He's a first-rate liar. The guy's a liar.
But he even admitted, 86 means to remove something. That right there was an admission. He should have never said, if he was going to play dumb, let me tell you something, play dumb. To remove something. She said to replace something. And 47, they knew exactly what it was. I don't think that they found that in the sand that somebody did the day before. The tide would have come in and
what you
washed
can't
it away.
see, obviously, because it's only audio here, is his facial expression when he made those comments. Because he has this little smirk in his face. And, of course, like I said, the anchor's looking at him like he's a rock star. And take me back to that walk on the beach. Take me back to the walk on the beach. You think that's a question? I mean,
not a question.
If that were Trump there, they would be all over him like flies on manure. All right, they'd be on him, and the poor guy wouldn't be able to breathe. Yet she talks to him like, "Well, what gave you the inspiration to take that picture?" Oh, gag me.
How nice.
Yes. So anyway, we have a lie from Comey. And nothing's going to happen from this, folks. I'd like to tell you that they were going to put him in shackles and drag him away, but I truly think that the deep state's got it. They're protecting their own. They're protecting their own. Now, is Trump having an effect on the people who are on the other side? Absolutely. Hillary Clinton can't help herself. She's still making comments. She still has to drop her 2 cents about everything. Because I think she's afraid that maybe Trump is going to get some footing here, and we're going to end up in jail. But the deep state's protecting their own.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, Comey's not going anywhere. I mean, I'd like to think that there was a fair system. In a system that was really truly honest, these people would have to face a consequence. That representative down in Newark, who was her name? It slips my mind. She was the one who was a MacGyver. That's what it is. I should remember that. Thinking of the TV show. She was arrested. They filed indictment charges against her for getting into a scuffle with ICE agents last Friday. She said it was the ICE agent's fault. No, you shouldn't have been there, lady. You shouldn't have been causing a problem.
She was on camera assaulting him, but she's saying they misinterpreted and twisted it. No, the camera doesn't lie. But you do.
They released the mayor of Newark. They dropped the charges against him. I thought that was generous on the part of the federal government, but I guess they figured that it's only a misdemeanor anyway. So why get lost in the weeds? Let's go after someone. The MacGyver threw a punch at an ICE agent. You can't do that.
No, you can't. But and if they drop the charges against her, that'll be the biggest mistake, because once they drop a charge against her, she can sit there and turn that around and sue and get money. And no, they've got to take this through. And the problem they're going to have is a jury from that area is probably going to be in favor of her to, stick it to the man, even though, the man was right in this case. I mean,
Well, Hakeem Jeffries last week said he came out and challenged the federal government. Go ahead, do it. See what happens. See what happens. That's a red line in the sand. You cross that red line, just watch what happens. This is the guy who's the Democratic head of the House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
He's the minority leader, and he's talking like a street thug. Go ahead. Yeah, you do it. You watch what happens, eh? Unbelievable. These are the people who are running our government.
Yeah.
These are the people who are making decisions that affect your family.
Well, to tell you how much you can trust Hakeem Jeffries, he's talking about Biden and the story about him being illegitimate and everything. He's going, it's fake news.
Listen.
Questions?
Thank you, sir. Given the revelations with President Biden's cancer diagnosis and the release of the Her reporting, why were Democrats not more open to talking about President Biden's age in 2024?
My thoughts and prayers have been extended to President Biden. It's a painful moment for him and his family. It's a very serious diagnosis. My expectation that President Biden is going to meet this moment with the courage and resilience that he's consistently shown. It seems to me entirely inappropriate that at this moment in time, when President Biden is dealing with a serious and aggressive form of cancer, there are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theories and want us to look backward at a time when they actually are taking health care away from the American people. No, as House Democrats, we're going to look forward. They literally are trying to take health care away from millions of Americans at this very moment in the dead of night. And Republicans want to fan the flames of conspiracy theories at this moment? No, thank you.
You know, I used to think this guy, I gave him much more credit than he deserves. He's a fathead. And no Republicans are taking health care benefits away from Americans. It's just not happening. It's part of the lie they're peddling. They haven't got a platform, by the way. The left hasn't got a platform, so they're going to invent lies. They're going to run on lies.
Well, nice spin there, by the way. But here's what he was doing, because with Biden, they were in trouble to begin with. Biden was in trouble to begin with. So one way, and they knew that the election was fake. They know it. It's coming back to haunt them now, and the auto pin. So what they're doing is they're taking a health issue and using that as their distraction there, and trying to pin the tail on the Republican. Hey, it's time that we take a little break and ask you to share the program. We would appreciate that. It helps us out.
So we're in a world where there's a lot of distraction out there. We're being led in a lot of different directions. It's hard for the average Joe on the sideline to really get a handle on what the heck is truly going on and what the true story is, even from our side. We heard about Hakeem Jeffries and how he's trying to tell everybody that we're taking away your health care. By the way, that's an old spin that the Democrats have used time and time again. If they'll say to you, and I'm sure they'll say it to you if you ask them today, that the Republicans want to take away your Social Security. That's just a standard operating line for the left.
I hear it every other day. Going to take away your Social Security, your Medicaid. You're not going to be able to get cheap drugs anymore, and grocery prices are going to go up. They're taking your jobs. You know what? These are all lies. Now, jobs, they're probably going to go away due to AI if we don't do something about that quick, but that's a whole different topic.
Right. We are being told by our side, don't look at Epstein. It was a suicide. It was, hey, there's nothing to see here. Just move along. From people that we've trusted. So, and a lot of people aren't swallowing that story. And we all kind of find it hard that these people who in these positions now, who we thought were really smart guys, are they just going along with the story that they were handed by the FBI? Here's the file. Read the file and tell us we're wrong. Again, isn't there a possibility that the file was a bit of creative writing from somebody in the FBI creative writing department? I mean, I could write as a storyteller, I could write a file that probably looked pretty honest, pretty straightforward. It would be a lie. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are people in federal government that can do that in a heartbeat. Heck, I could turn around to AI and say to an AI, I need a file that says that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, and I need to have key points in that to verify my statement. And I'll bet you the AI will come out with something which looks pretty good, pretty legit.
Well, it's got so much history and, journalistic and, fictional knowledge out there. It can take from this and take from that and put together a one hell of a story.
Yeah, a lot of things that are happening, and it's going to be a busy week. Try not to be terribly distracted. By the way, I should also point out before I forget that we sell a coffee. Yeah, I know. I have good transitions and I have bad transitions. That was a so-so transition. We sell something called Jim and Bill's Right Side Coffee in our gift shop, and it's really a delicious cup of coffee. Go to jimbillsrightsideshop.com, rightsideshop.com, or go to jimandbill.com, jimandbill.com, and you'll see a red button. You scroll down, you see a red button, shop here. You hit the button, takes you right to that store. You can buy the coffee, you can buy some mugs, you can buy hats and whatever. We have a bunch of other things there that are kind of cute, fun to look at. And we're always updating that site. You might want to make it a regular thing to stop back every so often and see whether something new has been added. But the coffee's delicious. It's made from some of the best coffee beans you can find on the planet, and it is a medium blend roast, a medium decaf blend roast, too. You got to try it. Jim and Bill's Right Side Coffee. We have Juan Jose and the Border Crosses here to sing our jingle.
Wake up on the right side with Right Side Coffee.
They do such a nice job. Wake up on the right side with Right Side Coffee. Bill, anything you want to add before we put a fork in this one?
No, I think we're going to wait and see what develops during the day, because I would say it's only Tuesday. But it just seems that the news this week is there's a lot of stories out there. The Biden story is out there. There's just so many things that are going on. Let's see what happens.
Try not to be distracted today, folks, by the nonsense. I think if we know anything by now, we have to understand that the deep state works by creating false narratives, okay? And they try to take you down dead ends. You walk people down enough dead ends, they get tired of the walk, and they stop walking. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we're getting right now. A lot of people, both on the right and the left, I mean, everybody's getting a little tired of these promises made, promises not kept, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, you've got to watch what's going on, but you might want to go to the website, jimandbill.com, check out the secret plan, the fictional plan of how to sit there and do everything. It's a fictional plan because we have to legitimately say that, because we said, oh, well, this is the recipe, but
yeah,
it's like going to a recipe book. It's a fictional recipe until you actually put it into play, and then it's no longer fictional. Same thing with that. We wanted to see if we could see what the computer would come up with as an action plan if we wanted to do exactly what we see going on in the news without telling it what was going on, and it laid out a plan.
I got to tell you, Bill, if you're a baby boomer, you're an older person right now, you've been around for a bit, you grew up in the age where television was just coming into play, and then you saw computers, and my God, do you remember those Texas Instrument computers and those old Commodores and stuff? They were like as good as it would get. Mm-hmm. What we're living in right now is Flash Gordon land. We're living in that future we used to read about in comic books, where all of a sudden the computer would think for itself and come out with answers and do things that you can't imagine. And now the robotics, it was just a little while ago that these little robots that they were making in these different places, I think one of them is Boston Dynamics. I remember seeing the videos from like 5 years ago. They had a hard time standing up by themselves. They had a hard time climbing stairs. Now they're doing somersaults. Now these robots, they've got the stability thing down really well. They can climb just about any set of stairs, get out of any kind of an awkward situation. They're the future, as scary as that may be, and we're really close to it. And I think, remember yesterday we played a cut where somebody who's in the know said by the time the Trump administration ends, AI will be 15,000 times better than it is right now. 15,000 times more sophisticated. Not 15 times, not 150 times, 15,000 times better than it is now.
One piece of advice I'll give you, if you do work with AI, is that it can get confused. In other words, if you're sitting there working on a project and you want to do some other things, or you want to come back to this project another time, if you have an AI account, tell the AI to save it in a folder. It will save it then, because it does record the conversations, but now it knows and it has a record of how to go back and access what you've done. Because every time it starts, it's a fresh, new, clean slate. At least it's got the basis of what you were doing. If you're working on multiple projects throughout your time that you're on there, you may want to log out and log back in, because it doesn't always know how to delineate. Let's say you're writing about, I don't know, it's a great day at the beach, and then okay, we got to do something more serious. And you type in what you want it to do. We want to do some research on cancer. And then it will sit there somewhere along the line. It will sit there and saying, if you're at the beach and you realize you got cancer when you're wading in the water, it's like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The beach has nothing to do with the cancer story. You got to sit there going, stop the presses. Let's get out of this thing. And then that's where you highlight what you want it to do.
So you really have to control it, kind of. You have to tell it where to
control it.
You have to tell it where to look for its answers.
Yes,
basically.
But now one thing that it will do, whether it's Chat GPT or Grok 3, the other one, you've seen me manipulate it, and now I don't verbally talk to it, but I type, and it sits there, and it's to where it knows you, and it has some memory of when I log in, when it sees the Bill Knight login. It's standard. Hi, Bill, how are you? But then it'll sometimes prompt up things about other things.
Yeah.
So, but you've got to clean that slate.
You wonder where it's going. Will it be verbal? Will you be talking to it sometime soon? And will you be having a discussion?
Well, I think that's just that's a module they put in. If you've got a microphone, like we got a microphone into our computer, why can't they put that module in? And it does something. Like one of the things I know, I have other things that I do. I have a website and in a particular area, and I was going, I want to expand the reach. And I was going, there's a lot of Hispanics around anymore. Everywhere you go, what's the dominant, language? Well, English is it. But then I found that 20% of the market is Hispanic. And then I'm sitting there going, and then there's like 2 or 1% of different things. I'm going, it makes sense to, do a section in Spanish. I don't write Spanish. I barely speak it. And I found out, I can take what you say and I can do it. I can build the whole web section for you, all in Spanish.
Wow.
Now, I would want somebody to read it to make sure, that
you get a little wild AI there, I know. All of a sudden, you're getting yourself in trouble. Hey, listen, we got to wrap this up. It's been an interesting program, a lot of things to be on the lookout for. There will be a lot of distractions, and I'm sure They're not going to make it easy for President Trump as the days, weeks, and months progress. They're going to make it as hard as they can for him to implement stuff. We will, and the closer we get to the midterms, the more difficult it's going to get for the president, I'm afraid. So, but please come back tomorrow. We'll do it again. We'll talk about it again, have some different cuts to talk about, and a lot of interesting stories. Anything you want to add before we wrap this up, Bill?
No, I think that's about it. Just pay attention to the news. Check out the Jim and Bill website. Some interesting stories on there. And we may have some later today, or at least for sure tomorrow, because we do that. Going into the holiday weekend, probably take a break with the staff. Yeah, you never know.
And that being said, sir?
Well, no, we didn't say one thing.
What's that?
Hasta la vista, baby. We're out of here.
This is CRN America.